Hello, welcome to Midlands Today. The headlines tonight. The flying community in shock after a training flight crash that killed 2 men in Worcestershire.
It's difficult for everybody involved, and we send our deepest condolences to all those affected by this tragic accident.
Air accident investigators have spent the day at the scene, which has been shrouded in mist. Also tonight, ripping our vans apart like tin cans, criminal gangs targeting small businesses.
To come to see this van like this is just a nightmare.
Wintering wildlife in Worcestershire, wetlands restoration a resounding success. So keen on building a playhouse, he asked for planning permission. Now the council want him on the team.
And the Clent Hills would have been shrouded in fog today. The highest ground was most prone to it, but things are improving for one day at least. Hear all about it in the forecast later.
Good evening. The region's flying community is said to be in deep shock today following yesterday's fatal plane crash in Worcestershire. Air accident investigators have spent the day at the crash site where 2 men died. It's been confirmed the light aircraft was on a training flight when it came down on Breeden Hill near Overbury. The pilot and passenger, who haven't yet been named, were heading to Gloucestershire Airport, where messages of condolence and support have been coming in from around the country throughout the day. Liz Copper reports.
In a field on the Overbury estate in Worcestershire, this is where the aircraft came to rest. Investigators have spent most of the day here. The aircraft's destination had been Gloucestershire Airport at Staverton near Cheltenham. Here the flags were at half-mast as a mark of respect.
This is a very busy general aviation airport, handling around 80,000 flights a year, but it's a small community and it's difficult for everybody involved, and we send our deepest condolences to all those affected by this tragic accident.
The aircraft was operated by this company, which runs flight training courses. This video on the firm's social media site illustrates the training it offers to pilots. The single-engine aircraft had left Coventry Airport yesterday lunchtime, but air traffic controllers in Gloucestershire lost contact. Investigators say on board were an instructor and a student. Yesterday, visibility here was very poor, and today it's also really foggy. The weather conditions will form a central part of the investigation into this crash. Investigators will also be examining the wreckage as they try to establish the cause of this accident.
Once we've gathered all the information, we'll be looking at all aspects to do with the operation of the flight, maintenance of the aircraft, the purpose of the flight, qualifications, training and experience of the crew, and building a picture up to really what happened, why it happened, and more importantly, is there any safety recommendations we can make to try and prevent a recurrence.
Floral tributes have been placed at the crash site in memory of the 2 men whose lives were lost in this flying accident.
Well, Liz joins us live now from Gloucestershire Airport near Cheltenham. This type of investigation can be a painstaking process, Liz. What more have we learnt today?
Well, the location of this accident is at a rural estate that's not very easily accessible to the public. And in fact, when we went down today, we were escorted there by the police. When the air ambulance was deployed there, it had to land a short distance away, and then paramedics had to be driven to the site. Now, the relative inaccessibility of that site has meant it's taken a little while to recover the wreckage, but that has now been done, and it means that investigators will now move on to the next stage of their inquiries, which involves gathering evidence. What they will be doing is they will be taking statements both here in Gloucestershire and also in Coventry, and they will be asking for any witnesses to this accident to come forward. They will also be gathering data, crucially radar data, and also data from the Met Office about the weather conditions yesterday. Now, we don't yet have formal confirmation of the identities of the 2 men who were involved in this accident. We expect that to happen in the next few days.
Liz, thank you. A man from Wensfield in the Black Country has appeared in court charged with belonging to the banned British neo-Nazi group National Action. 28-year-old Darren Fletcher was one of 6 people arrested following an inquiry led by West Midlands Counter-Terrorism Unit. Another man, Daniel Bogjuvonic, also faces charges of intending to incite racial hatred by posting material which is threatening, abusive or insulting at Aston University campus in Birmingham in 2016. A former soldier from Worcester has been arrested in Thailand, where a woman died after falling from a balcony. Reese Vella was arrested in Pattaya yesterday in a bar a short distance from the scene on suspicion of causing death by negligence, overstaying his visa and theft. According to the Crown Prosecution Service, the 25-year-old, who denies the charges, was jailed in 2012 for rape and assault. An injunction banning car cruising in the Black Country has been extended for a further 3 years by the High Court today. The injunction bans people from taking part in a car cruise, which is racing on the streets, anywhere within Wolverhampton, Dudley, Sandwell and Walsall. Since being introduced in 2015, 17 people have also been convicted of breaching the injunction. The former Arga foundry in Coalbrookdale, Shropshire, has been put up for sale. Production there stopped in November after the US-owned firm said the base was no longer economically viable. As yet, there's no price tag or any indication as to who might be interested, but Arga says it will make any buyer aware of the site's historical significance. Well, next tonight, a major problem for tradesmen and women in the West Midlands who fear their vans and tools are being targeted by organised crime gangs. In some cases, vehicles are being cut open like tin cans, they say, causing thousands of pounds worth of damage. Victims are urging the police to crack down on the crime that's damaging their livelihoods, and they've begun sharing information online to raise awareness. Trisha Dudu reports.
This is what van tool theft looks like in 2018.
To see this van like this is just a nightmare.
Thieves used screwdrivers and a camera probe to see what the landscaper from Hampton Arden had in his van before using bolt cutters to prise open its contents, stealing £5,000 worth of gardening tools.
They have taken the chainsaws, they've taken hedge cutters, etc. Concrete disc cutter, and everything we've had, we paid for. We bought out of our hard-earned money.
Well, spikes in thefts of and from vans like these are estimated to cost £100 million to tradesmen across the UK. It appears the West Midlands is being targeted by organised gangs, like this one captured by members of the Van and Tool Theft Awareness Facebook page.
And this is as quick as it takes to get into a brand new vehicle. The lights flash, he's inside, he presses a button on the dashboard and it opens the back of the van up.
Kevin from Great Bar runs the group and estimates that 1 in 5 of the 10,000 registered traders are from the Midlands and have experienced tool theft from their vans.
Because the tools are so easy to get rid of, unless there's some sort of legislation that stops them being sold without any checks whatsoever, it's going to carry on.
And there are certainly questions around legislation, with the criminal justice system finding some of those caught stealing as little as £50. So what are the police doing?
We do take crime seriously. We make sure that all lines of inquiries are followed up. It's really important to us that we identify those lines of inquiry so we can bring those offenders to justice.
The police advise that people beef up their security and park in well-lit areas. But with thieves so adept at stealing the tools in the first place, the solution is not going to be quite as rapid. Trisha Dudu, BBC Midlands Today, Birmingham.
Well, tomorrow we'll be looking at rural business crime, asking how well the police are dealing with it. We'll be hearing from one company boss from South Staffordshire coming to terms with the theft of machinery worth £200,000. A jury's been hearing from the mother and former boyfriend of a teenager allegedly murdered in a sex attack. Megan Bills's body was found in a wardrobe wrapped in cling film in a hostel nearly 3 weeks afterwards. A hostel worker told the court how they found her in the wardrobe. Joanne Riddle reports from Wolverhampton Crown Court.
Wolverhampton Crown Court heard how 17-year-old Megan Bills was allegedly murdered in a violent sexual attack by this man, Ashley Foster, who'd been released from Birmingham prison just days before. Crispin Aylett, for the prosecution, told the jury that in the absence of evidence, they may think it reasonable to believe that he could have strangled her. He said Foster's former partner said he'd asked to strangle her during sex, but that she'd refused. CCTV showed Meghan going into Foster's room at a hostel in Brierley Hill on Easter Sunday last year. Her badly decomposed body was found in a wardrobe wrapped in cling film some 3 weeks later. A hostel worker told the court there was a smell coming from the room before they went in and found her. Foster has denied murder but admitted preventing her lawful burial. Meghan's mother, Dawn Bills, seen here in the centre, told the jury that Meghan had never mentioned Foster. She said she adopted her when she was 7. When she left school, she studied hairdressing at college in Halesowen. She moved into a bedsit in Dudley where her boyfriend Joshua Edwards lived. Meghan's mother said she'd planned to move back home in May but died the month before. Meghan's former boyfriend, Joshua Edwards, told the court that her attitude had changed when she went to college and started hanging around with the wrong people. He said they rowed and he moved out of the bedsit. Asked if they'd had a normal and not a violent sexual relationship, he said it was normal. Meghan's mother told the court that as a child, her daughter sang in a choir. She sat quietly in court during today's harrowing evidence. The trial continues.
And Joanne joins us right now. The jury also heard from Foster's half-sister today, Joanne. What did she have to say?
Yeah, we heard from Carly Forrester. She said that she tried to help Foster, her half-brother, after he came out of prison in the short time before he was arrested. She said he'd asked her to cook a Sunday roast for him on Easter Sunday. Now, of course, we know that Easter Sunday last year was the day that Meghan was seen going into his room in the hostel in Brierley Hill. She said when he failed to arrive at the time they'd arranged, she called him. He said that he'd just woken up and would be ready in an hour. She said that when he did arrive, he was a little anxious, but she assumed it was down to cannabis, something that she disapproved of. She also told the jury that how on a later date he'd asked her to buy cling film for him and given her £2. She asked what it was for and he smirked and said, "Never you mind," but she said that she assumed it could have been to wrap weed. Now, we should say that much of the evidence is too distressing, too graphic to broadcast, but the prosecution has suggested that Foster could have wanted to carry out a fantasy. The trial here will continue tomorrow.
Joanne, thank you. And thanks to you for joining us this Tuesday evening here on Midlands Today. Our top story. The region's flying community is in shock after a training flight crash that killed 2 men in Worcestershire. Dank and dismal weather-wise today, but Shafali's coming soon with news of a brand new bright tomorrow-ish. Also tonight, how wetlands in Worcestershire are bursting with wildlife after successful restoration work. And the young lad from Dudley who asked for planning permission to build a playhouse. Now the council want him on board. Now, it's thought to be one of the busiest motorway junctions in the country, so much so it's generally felt that improvements to Junction 6 on the M42 close to Birmingham Airport and the NEC are long overdue. 70,000 vehicles use the roundabout above it every single day, at times stuck in gridlock traffic. Now, Highways England has unveiled details of a major upgrade, costing more than £250 million. Our transport correspondent Peter Plisner has been looking at what's being planned.
Busy this morning, although not gridlocked like it has been in the past, but this junction is clearly no longer fit for purpose.
Part of the reason this junction is often so busy is that you've got the airport and the National Exhibition Centre over here. Both are continuing to grow. Not far away there's the Jaguar Land Rover factory. Over here in the future there'll be an HS2 station.
It's finally dropped with the boys that we are in a different environment nowadays. And in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think it was quite evident that the penny had dropped. So going forward, I don't foresee any other problems there. But certainly, it was certainly a challenge earlier in the tour.
Now, a little bit earlier, I spoke to our cricket correspondent Jonathan Agnew and asked him about Bayliss setting this end date for his time in charge of England.
Some people might say it's a little bit presumptuous of the coach to say, well, look, I'll be here till 2019 anyway. I'm not sure that's the way he might have said it. but he clearly believes that he still has a part to play until 2019. But there will be a review of this tour, and if those conducting that review feel that the coach is in any way culpable for England's performance in these Ashes, then he might not be here in 2019.
Do you feel that he is culpable in any part?
Well, they'll be looking at the discipline off-field. That's something I'm sure that as he admits, really dogged this tour of Australia. It started with Ben Stokes. That was entirely out of Bayliss's hands, of course. But there was always going to be a lot of scrutiny on his players on this tour. And from the very first night of the tour onwards, there were incidents. And that's something that does fall onto his watch, I feel, as the coach. He has to set the discipline required, along with the captain and others. But the coach is very much in charge, I think, of that.
Finally, Jonathan, there's no time to catch breath, really. We've got the one-day series against Australia, then there's the tour to New Zealand, there's Pakistan and India in the English summer. What do you hope to see from... Should we stick with the test side, shall we, and going forward across the next few months?
Well, they've got to find a young quick bowler from somewhere. That's definite, and that works whether you're in England or in Australia or in India or anywhere else. You've got to find some quality pace. They've got to find a quality spin bowler, because there's been a while now where we've worried about Moeen Ali. I mean, he's, I think, overperformed in a way in recent years. I think probably he underperformed in Australia, but somewhere in the middle there is a happy balance. I mean, really, he's a batsman who bowls, so they've got to find a frontline spinner as well. And I think, very importantly as well, they've got to hope that Joe Root's confidence hasn't taken any sort of a bashing after this Ashes series, and only time will tell.
Jonathan Agnew there, our cricket correspondent. Let's take a look at a few of the other stories making the headlines this evening. Johanna Konta says she feels good and she's fit ahead of the Australian Open, which starts on Monday, despite being knocked out in the first round of the Sydney International. British #1 was the defending champion in Sydney, but was handed a tough draw against Agnieszka Radwanska, so she is out. That's the VAR system. It's going to be used in next week's FA Cup third-round replays between Chelsea and Norwich, and Leicester and Fleetwood Town. VAR was used for the first time in a competitive English club game in last night's FA Cup win for Brighton in the third round. Wales and Ospreys flanker Dan Lydiate has been ruled out for the rest of the season with a bicep injury. Lydiate was injured in Ospreys' win at Dragons on New Year's Eve. He's going to need surgery later this week. Another blow for Wales, that is, ahead of the Six Nations, with Sam Warburton out and Talupe Faletau also a doubt. UK Sport has set Team GB a target of at least 5 medals at next month's Winter Olympics in South Korea. The current record is 4, set in 1924, and also that was matched at the last Games in Sochi. Team GB's Paralympic athletes have been set a target of 7. Here's our sports correspondent, Joe Wilson.
Korean Cultural Centre, Central London. For everything the Winter Games means to the host nation, it means more than ever to British sport. An audience gathered to hear the targets. Lizzie Arnold's gold was one of 4 British Winter Olympic medals won in 2014. 5 at least are expected this time.
Can we really be winning more medals in more sports with more investment? It's got to stop somewhere, hasn't it, Catherine?
I know, it's a really good question, because every time it seems to be, and now this will be the best ever this time. And you sort of think, oh, you know, is it possible to keep going? I think the great thing with the Winter Olympics, the Winter Paralympics, it's still a games that's developing very much in Great Britain. It's you know, we've had some really impressive results over the past few Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, but we're seeing more consistency now, and it's definitely an area we can grow.
Well, speed skater Elise Christie could win 2 medals for Britain on her own. As for the Winter Paralympics, well, the medal target is at least 7, but there's always more to be played for.
You make connections where you see them, but what we do see is the profound sense that people get from the Paralympics, that it's high-class sport, but with a higher purpose. It tells you something about yourself and what's possible, and I hope actually will challenge perceptions of disability in society.
The UK's investment in Pyeongchang's winter sport is £32 million of lottery money. As ever, that's only fun if it pays off. Joe Wilson, BBC News, Central London.
Now, any Yorkshireman will tell you that if they were a country, they would have finished 12th in the medal table at the 2012 Olympics. The county's now looking for sporting independence, would you believe, by setting up its own international football team. Confused? Dave Edwards explains.
Yorkshire, God's own county. It's got its own identity, its own dialect, its own way of life. So why not its own football team? Ilkley Moor Bar Tat has already...
Welcome back. I'm so sorry we've had a major technical failure with a power cut on some of our equipment. So I'm sorry you've missed some of the programme, but hopefully we'll be able to bring you stories including the Junction 6 M42 revamp later on our 10:30 bulletin. But just to pick up where we should be now, let me tell you about ambitious plans to restore a disappearing wildlife habitat in Worcestershire, which appear to be paying off. Hundreds of wintering birds have been returning to Longdon Marsh near Upton upon Severn. Bird lovers are delighted the threatened wildfowl are coming back in greater numbers, as Bob Hockenhull reports.
Dancing in the skies above a newly restored wetland which has become their winter home. Hundreds of widgeon, teal and pintails are helping to make Longdon Marsh in South Worcestershire an internationally important site for wintering birds.
Most of the birds out there have come from Central Europe and Russia to escape the freezing temperatures, although it's not exactly warm here today either.
In the last 100 years, the world has lost half its wetland habitats. Longdon Marsh also deteriorated as the land around here was drained for agriculture. But since owning the site, Worcestershire Wildlife Trust has been restoring it, digging out ponds and channels and improving water levels with sluices.
What we've done is we've actually created a couple of areas where you can hold water back for a lot longer periods. And that's brilliant because it means it becomes a much more stable habitat for birds in the long term. And if we can hold it through into the breeding season, we can keep the ground wetter. Some of those birds like lapwing and redshank that have really started to drop in number, we can create that wetter habitat, not flooded, just damp, which will enable them to feed for invertebrates here and raise their chicks, and that's a real aim for us.
The reeds around the marshland also attract smaller birds. It makes this whole area an ornithologist's dream. Mike Smart has been bird watching for 65 years. He's delighted the improvements to Longdon Marsh are bringing new opportunities to enjoy his hobby.
Well, it's a real spectacular thing when you see those widgeon and teal all going up together and hear the rush of the wings, and they all have different calls. It's something exciting, primeval. It's really fantastic.
We were given special access for our filming, but the Wildlife Trust asks any visitors who want to watch the displays use this hide. With 1 in 8 wetland species in the UK threatened with extinction, conservationists hope more landscapes like this will return in the future. Bob Hockenhull, BBC Midlands Today, Worcestershire.
With all those birds flying over, I'm glad Bob's wearing a hat. Now, here's a boy who thinks outside the box. Even at the age of 7, he actually sought planning permission from his local council in Dudley when his parents said he couldn't build a playhouse in the back garden. Ben Baker-Barnes impressed town planners so much they want to include his ideas in any future plans for regeneration. He also scooped a national award in the process. Our Black Country reporter Ben Godfrey has been to meet him.
He may be only 7, but Ben Baker-Barnes took his love of brick building to the next level. After school, he devised a plan for a new house in his back garden in Dudley for his toy collection.
I can do my homework and take my Lego boxes in there and do some Lego instead of getting Lego lost in the house.
We said, no, you can't build a house in the back garden. And he said, well, I heard people can write to the council.
He sent his designs to Dudley Council for planning permission.
Diagrams on how he was going to build it. He'd put little stones in each corner. He'd measure it all out.
Remember, he's 7, so planning officers politely declined.
They said, we'll have a meeting in 10 days, so they did, and they said no.
And they also spotted a talent. They urged Ben to enter the Royal Town Planning Institute School Awards, and he only won.
I wanted to build something like a communicate area.
Ben's winning design was not a Lego house, but for a farm shop, come milkshake bar, come aquarium, on this plot of land on Wolverhampton Street in Dudley.
10 months.
Do you think you do it in 10 months? That's not bad, is it?
We've brought the town's planning chief along to see what she thinks. No pressure then.
This land is actually in private ownership, so the council doesn't own it, but we are doing some work in the area on open space and public realm, and whilst we may not get a farm shop, we might be able to incorporate some of Ben's ideas in some of those schemes. I think it's great that anybody in the community gets involved in regeneration, but it's even better when it's somebody who's 7 years old.
I can make people communicate and have fun and play games instead of just walking past this dump yard.
So Ben is already seizing the opportunity, bringing in his two sisters into his A-team in the hope that they'll create more fun places for them to visit in Dudley. Ben Godfrey, BBC Midlands Today.
Big Ben and Little Ben. It's time for the weather now. Shafali's here, pleased to quote the funniest man of the 20th century, bring me sunshine.
Very good, Nick, and that's your ringtone too, isn't it? That's why I've worn yellow, just for luck, and we could be in luck, actually. Anything has got to be better than this, and you can see there from our dog, he wasn't particularly impressed. Neither were these two, heading off back down the hill away from the fog, probably only to find that it was fairly widespread today at lower levels too, and lingering, which is why temperatures in most cases didn't rise much above 5 Celsius. In fact, across the north of the region, only 2 Celsius today. But there is a change on the way, and it's being triggered by this cold front that is moving in from the southwest during tonight. Now, once it clears, we'll see a change in wind direction to a milder southwesterly. Also, the cloud is going to break up. And so all in all, that is going to mean that we'll see after tomorrow cloudier conditions, foggier conditions and cooler conditions. But tomorrow is the best day of the week. And the cloudier, foggier conditions are due to this very slack airflow. So the air is not moving very much and it's not likely to chop up that cloud anytime soon. However, as I say, this is the cold front that's going to be moving up from the southwest later on tonight. Initially, we've got all that cloud and some hill fog and some mist across us, but that rain will push that out of the way slowly. And I think across the eastern half of the region later on tonight, we've still got that mist and that fog and that cloud. So here temperatures could only dip to around 5 Celsius. So it's quite mild for a night. Elsewhere further west, once that rain clears, temperatures will dip to around 2 Celsius. And in rural spots where the cloud breaks up a little bit, we may get a touch of frost as those values near freezing. But tomorrow morning, it is a fairly dull start to the day, just the last dregs of that rain clearing northeastwards, and then after that it's a gradual clearing up process. We'll see that cloud breaking up, some nice decent sunny spells developing possibly into the afternoon, more particularly across the west of the region, brighter spells here in the east, and temperatures responding quite nicely, especially so with that southwesterly wind direction. Light winds as well, and we'll see temperatures rising to 8 Celsius as a maximum. Now after that, as I said, high pressure will start to dominate, the winds will die down completely. So tomorrow night, the frost returns in the west, the mist and the fog as well, and temperatures a little bit lower.
Thanks, Shafali. And that was at least part of the Midlands Today. Apologies again, we've had a major technical failure tonight. We're back at 10:30 with your late update and the stories you missed. Have a good evening. Bye for now.